Hello and welcome to another episode of the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. This is John Jantz, and my guest today is Carmine Gallo. He's a best-selling author of Talk Like TED and The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. He's a Harvard instructor, CEO, communication coach, and keynote speaker known for transforming leaders. He's also the author of a new book we're going to talk about today, The Bezos Blueprint, Communication Secrets of the World's Greatest Salesman. So, Carmine, welcome back to the show.
Hey, John. Nice to thank you for inviting me. I've been a fan of a lot of the recent podcasts, especially. I see you had Paul Zach on one of your podcasts not too long ago, the neuroscientist. So he and
Yeah,
I exchange emails and ideas, especially when it comes to storytelling and oxytocin and
yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
good stuff that he does the research in.
We got into some pretty deep stuff, no question. So
I feel my oxytocin levels rising already. Those dopamine levels.
so let's jump into your new book, and I'm going to start off by asking maybe what might be a gut reaction by some people, kind of why Bezos. I know you're going to tell me why, but there's
Yeah.
also not everybody loves him. So as a human being, perhaps, but maybe we're not going to talk about him as a human being and more about as a salesperson. So I'll let you start there.
If you ask 10 people for an opinion on whoever it might be,
Right.
Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, any of these visionaries and entrepreneurs here in America, if you ask 10 people for their opinion on Jeff Bezos, which I've done over the last 3 years of doing the research for my new
Sure.
book, you get 10 different opinions,
Right.
wide variety of opinions
Yeah. Yeah.
running the gamut. If you ask 10 people who worked side by side with Jeff Bezos, their opinions are very consistent. They even use remarkably the same words. They all start with the most visionary person they've ever met.
Yeah.
Then they move into demanding a person who demanded excellence of himself and others around him. And John, they always end with the same observation. They say, Carmine, I would never have traded it for the world.
Hmm.
That's what that's where I picked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? What did you learn from Jeff Bezos that you adopted and carried over into the companies that you started? So really my book, The Blueprint, is not based just on Bezos, but it's based on interviews and conversations with former Amazonians who have adopted the leadership and communication strategies that Bezos pioneered to build Amazon and blatantly copied some of those systems and use them to build their own companies. That's what fascinates me.
Yeah, yeah, and I assume you probably had some similar research, and maybe even you could have answered this question maybe the same way in your previous book about Steve Jobs, didn't you? I mean, there
Oh,
were a
absolutely.
lot of people that felt
Absolutely. Look,
very demanding. Yeah, yeah,
if you want to have a conversation on the role of Amazon in e-commerce or retail, there are plenty of books and articles on that subject. If you'd like to have a conversation about billionaires or income inequality, whatever it might be, there are plenty of books and essays on that subject. What I wanted to focus on is one of the things that intrigued me is I was watching an interview with Walter Isaacson, the famous
mhm,
biographer of Steve
mhm,
Jobs, Einstein, Ben Franklin, and his other books. And he was asked who of today's contemporary leaders would he put in the same category. And without missing a beat, he said Jeff Bezos, because Bezos was not only a visionary, but he was also creative and invented so many mechanisms that startups and managers and leaders use today. So, plus, John, look, we're storytellers. I'm an author. The story is irresistible.
yeah,
A guy with a bold idea and really no contacts and no funding at that time, no name for a company, transforms the idea into one of the world's most admired brands. And we can argue a company that has more impact over our lives than almost any other single company other than the company you work for. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
story itself is irresistible.
Yeah.
You can't, don't tell me not to pursue that story. That's a
No.
good story.
So, yeah, I think arguably you could say, you're talking about more on our individual consumer behavior and lives, but certainly the entire business behavior, e-commerce for sure,
Yeah.
retail in
Hey,
general,
John,
has been.
if I had nothing to teach you
Yeah.
from studying Bezos, his writing, the strategies he put in place to fuel Amazon, I would not have written the book.
Yeah.
It took me into so many different places that my other books that just didn't afford me. And I continued to learn. I'm constantly learning from some of the strategies he put in place, as did many others. That's what fascinates me.
So you start out the book with this, and I've heard you say this: the Bezos Blueprint. Readers will learn why simple is the new superpower. So you could argue that that's. I mean, you're really kind of starting with that as the overall premise of the book, aren't you?
Yeah, I could have titled the book Simple as the New Superpower because a lot of it really falls under how do we simplify complex information. So, in an age when we are being bombarded by information, all of our customers, our clients, now let's focus on marketers and the people who are listening to our podcast specifically. How do you rise above the noise? How do you cut through it? Well, the secret to cutting through the noise is not necessarily to add more noise, but to go in the opposite direction
Yeah.
and to cut through it. So there's a number of different ways to stand apart that appear kind of or sound counterintuitive early on, at least to me. And one is to use short words to talk about big ideas or to talk about hard things.
Yeah.
And that to me, that is simple as the new superpower. So I have an analysis in the book and I have a graphic that goes along with it. I reviewed 50,000 words that Bezos wrote in his shareholder letters over time. And a lot of experts and a lot of CEOs and company founders tell me that those shareholder letters were models of simplicity, which kind of led me in that direction. I analyzed all of the letters, put them through software tools, and here's something remarkable. As Amazon grew bigger and much more complex, you're talking about adding artificial intelligence and cloud computing, the writing got better over time. And how did it get better? If you look at readability statistics or readability software, it's measured by grade level.
Yeah.
So you probably know this, but what grade level should you be writing for to reach a wide and the largest and widest variety of readers and listeners? What
Um,
grade level do you think that
uh,
would be?
Probably not postgraduate thesis level. Um,
Absolutely not. All
like,
right, a
like
little
I mean,
lower.
I've heard sixth, seventh grade.
Yeah, it's eighth grade. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
eighth grade level. So if you write at an eighth grade level, you're still writing for intelligent adults. That's the whole counterintuitive notion about it. It doesn't mean that you're dumbing down the content. It means that you are giving people the opportunity to use less mental energy to absorb what you're writing.
Yeah. Right.
That
Right.
means short words to replace long words. Uh, Ancient words, one syllable words to replace those Latin based words that fill up legal contracts, shorter sentences, the active voice. So 90% of the Bezos letters are written in the active voice,
Yeah.
subject, verb, object. After 2007, his letters became easier to read, even though Amazon grew more complex over time. That that whole area to me is so fascinating, and it was intentional. John, that's what I learned from talking to people who had worked with Bezos. He has that growth mindset, always learning, always developing, always getting better, writing, public speaking, delivering presentations. That's a skill. And like
Mhm.
any skill, you can improve on it.
Yeah, I guess we didn't say this at the outset. I think it would be easy for people to think, "Oh, you're going to teach me how to build an e-commerce business or something." And what this book really focuses on is writing developing stories, writing, storytelling in a way that gets your message across. And so it really is a. Would you say that it's really a writing book?
Oh, yeah. If you'd like to learn how to be a third-party seller on Amazon, it's not going to teach you that. No, these are very actionable tips and strategies that anybody can use in any level of an organization or just starting out. Remember, Bezos did not have a name for his company, and he didn't have a company. It was just an idea
Yeah.
that he built in the garage of a rented home in Seattle. So it applies to everybody. A 1 million person company and a one person company.
So you break the book in three parts,
Yeah.
and the first one is really about. I think you talk about. I've heard you talk about this. That the first part's about discovering why strong writing skills are more essential than ever. So you want to kind of unpack what we'll meet in part one.
Yeah, especially about, well, that the first chapter is called Simple is the New Superpower
Yeah.
because we kind of go into those writing skills.
Yeah.
But I also I wanted to make this approachable. So I did go back to class myself. I interviewed some of the top writing authors, people who have written books on grammar and English grammar
Mm.
and how to write well, because a lot of writing books are kind of boring. It's not like those are the first books that we go to all the time. And so I definitely wanted to just to understand some of the themes that each and every one of us could use, not just in writing, but whenever we are trying to simplify complex information, whether that's in written word or in the way we articulate and present our ideas and information. And that's why simple could be the words you choose. That's one way of making it simple. How about metaphors and analogies? I have an entire chapter just on analogy and an entire chapter just on metaphor
Yeah.
because Bezos, Warren Buffett, and many other business leaders who are considered excellent communicators in their own way tend to use metaphors, comparing something that's abstract to something that's familiar. And there are a lot of famous metaphors that Jeff Bezos introduced at Amazon that continue to be used today, not just at Amazon, but many other companies.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things metaphors, really can do for is take a complex idea and have people get it right away, and in a handful of words. I think they also can be mixed. They can be misused.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a lot of things. You try to use humor in your writing, and if it's not actually funny or if it falls flat, then it actually does the opposite for you. I think
Yeah.
that can be, a a lot of metaphor use actually falls into cliche, which I think then probably works against you, doesn't it?
Oh, thank you, John. I actually talk about that. Again, if a metaphor is too cliche, it's not going to connect with people in any meaningful way. So it's a little too long to get into, but Bezos chose the analogies and the metaphors he used extremely precisely. He
Right.
was very deliberate about the metaphors he chose. So he took the flywheel concept. I'll just give you one quick example.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
took the flywheel concept, which he read from a book. He's a voracious reader, read a book by Jim Collins,
Yeah.
and took this whole idea of the flywheel mechanism and used it as a metaphor for how to grow a company,
Yeah.
how to create growth momentum within a company. So it's a metaphor that has to become an analogy in order to be explained. He has to be able to explain it a little bit. And that's sort of the difference between a good metaphor and an analogy. An analogy is more of a tool for education. But that, if you look up Amazon flywheel,
Yeah.
or even the flywheel effect, it's often tied back to Amazon. And a
Yeah.
lot of people use it in different organizations. But if it wasn't for Jeff Bezos reading a book, adopting something from a different discipline, and applying it to his company, it wouldn't be nearly as popular a buzzword as
Yeah.
it is today.
Yeah.
So, reading, thinking, always growing, applying ideas from different fields, different disciplines, different books. Uh, that was sort of the secret sauce that helped fuel Amazon's strategy and align teams from 1994 all the way to today. They still use the very same metaphors and strategies that Bezos put in place decades ago.
Yeah. I mean, flywheels, in every startup, Silicon Valley, you know, entrepreneur is using, that is
Exactly.
standard
John,
marketing talk today.
what was fascinating to me is for years, I live in Silicon Valley. So for years, I hear
Yeah,
things like flywheels. I hear two pizza teams.
yeah,
That's another Bezos
yeah, yeah,
metaphor. I hear that constantly in startups. I also hear them talk about six pagers, which are narrative memos that, again, Bezos pioneered at Amazon. More often than not, when I tell people that, oh, that's an Amazon thing, it really got started at Amazon under Jeff Bezos,
yeah.
they look at me like they've never heard that idea before. I mean, I got this blank expression on their face.
Yeah.
And so that's why I realized that there were a lot of things that Bezos created, these mechanisms that he created at Amazon, people use today, and they're not even aware that it's directly tied to his vision.
The part two talks about story building and story structure. You can't really pick up a marketing book today that doesn't talk about storytelling. It's really
Yeah,
become the thing. But I don't find too many. This is ironic. I don't
yeah.
find too many of those books that are actually able to tell people how to do it, how to use it.
Uh,
Everybody says you should be using stories, but a lot of people then go, "Well, how?" So, what do you feel like this book will bring to the story structure conversation?
I hope I can add something to it because I have a feeling some of my writing was responsible for creating some of this.
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling is a buzzword because I wrote a book that Talk Like Ted, which really went into
Right, right, right.
storytelling. Then I wrote an entire book just on business storytelling called The Storyteller's Secret. And I get that book quoted back to me quite a bit when people talk about storytelling. You're right. It's now become a buzzword, but it's still abstract. I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of people understand what it is. So I try to give people some very simple, actionable tools that they could use. The simplest thing, and very few people understand this. Maybe your audience does more than other leaders,
Yeah.
and that's the three-act structure. So I've got at
Mm.
least a whole chapter just on the three-act structure, which Bezos follows meticulously when he talks about the Amazon story. And the three-act structure is the same structure as most Hollywood movies follow, which is act one is the setup, act two is the challenge or confrontation,
Right.
act three is the resolution. Very few people break their presentations up into a three-act structure, introduce products as a three-act structure. Steve Jobs was very intentional about doing so. So I try to break down how to what we mean by storytelling and how to do it
Yeah.
simply. I feel like the three-act structure is something that many people are not aware of, John, but it's simple for them to implement and it helps them understand
Yeah.
what we mean by storytelling.
Yeah, I think a lot of times just giving people an outline, a structure, like that, makes it
Yeah.
easier for them to go, "Oh, okay, now I know where to start."
Yeah, but
Um,
please don't just say do storytelling. You got to be a
right, right,
storyteller. I
right.
hear that all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think the average leader understands how to implement that.
yeah. Totally agree. So part three then is about, okay, I've got my story. I know what I'm supposed to say. How do I deliver it in a way that is going to have impact? Which is, I think, essentially what part three is about.
Yeah, my favorite chapter in part three is make the mission your mantra. And
Hmm.
here again, I think is an area that very few people understand, or they certainly don't. The, it's not an element of their communication that it's that's very obvious to them. We all have a mission. Okay. Almost every company has some kind of mission or purpose. Often, as you know, they're just gobbledygook. It's a mission statement that's drafted by committee and put into a drawer somewhere. And that's why I never was a big fan of mission statements because most of the people I interview or work with can't even remember their own company's mission statement.
Yep.
So I didn't put a lot of stock into that. Then I started researching Bezos and Amazon. I'm looking at it differently now. Don't look at it as a mission. Think of it as a mantra. In 1998, in his second shareholder letter, or 1999, yeah, second shareholder letter, Jeff Bezos began to articulate this idea that Amazon would be the world's most customer centric company. the world's most customer centric company. At the time, John, it may not mean a lot to you today, but at the time it certainly did, because most people had the question, what's the internet? And now
Right.
you want me to buy something and put my credit card into this thing? They didn't understand it. So everything had to be customer obsessed. But what Bezos did over 24 shareholder letters and in every interview, every presentation, everything I could get my hands on for 30 years, he always brought it back to the mission. We are Earth's most customer centric company. And that's why when we developed the Kindle, this is what it means to the customer. We
Yeah.
are Earth's most customer centric company. And that's why when we developed our new cloud division, this is what it means to the customer.
Yeah.
Everything was about bringing it back to the central mission. And today, this was 1998, 1999. When you go onto Amazon today, what's the mission? Earth's most customer
Yeah.
centric company. When I heard Andy Jassy, who was the new CEO of Amazon, when I heard him in his first interview, he used that phrase several times. It's internalized. Bezos isn't even there. He's on the board, but he's running,
Right.
Blue Origin, a space company, but it's still internalized within the company. And that's what I mean by a mantra.
Yeah.
Forget about this mission statement. Turn your purpose and mission into a mantra that is simple, easy to understand, and something that the leader repeats. If
Yeah.
you don't repeat it, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about the mantra idea is, it inherently brings in simple, but you're right. A lot of times, even if people are passionate about a mission that they have, if it's not baked into everything, people forget about it. They don't, if the leader's not saying it every day, why do I have to remember it? So I think that's part of
Yeah.
what happens. When I first, I think, is that your wife or uh,
My wife Vanessa, yeah, she works
works
with
with you?
me
Yeah.
and co-teaches at Harvard and some other places with me.
So
Yeah.
when she kind of sent me, hey, Carmine's got a new book out. Here's what it's about. And I'm thinking, Amazon, Apple, like, what do they have to do with small business? I have a lot of small business owners, that are
Sure, yeah,
listeners.
absolutely.
But when I dug into it a little bit, particularly, one of the concepts, the day one concept, which is another term that I think you're going to suggest was coined
Yeah.
by Bezos. That's something that really, I don't care what size company you are, that is really a pretty brilliant idea, isn't it?
Absolutely, and talk about the mission.
Yeah.
So on day one is not a thing. Although if you go to Seattle, it's a building. It's called the Day One Building on the Amazon campus. Day one is not a thing. It's not a building. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
That's how it started. Day one is a mindset for always learning, always growing, always approaching every day, no matter how big your company gets or what area it goes into, always thinking about it as this is day one, always growing. Because day two, as Jeff Bezos later said, means stasis,
Yeah.
complacency, which leads to irrelevance and a slow, deteriorating, painful decline. So again, and that's something that's consistent. It started in 1997 with his first letter and his last letter in 2000 that came out in 2021. He ends it with, and remember, it's always day one. So if you have a vision or you have values that run your one person company or your small business, you're the one that needs to keep that center stage. You need to shine a spotlight on your vision and your values, both among your partners, your team, and certainly your customers. But it has to come from somewhere. And that's what leadership is.
So, Carmen, I appreciate you stopping by the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. Talk about the Bezos Blueprint. You want to invite people where they might find. Obviously, the book will be available everywhere, but where they might
Yep.
connect with you or find out more about your work.
Yeah, please visit me online. If you can remember a good Italian name like Carmine Gallo, you can find me online. You can go directly to my website, and that has my books and how you can contact me. And please, for any of our listeners, jump on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, and I love having interactions. And I talk to a lot of people every day on LinkedIn. So I think I'm the only Carmine Gallo in California.
Ah,
So I
all
think
right.
I'm pretty easy to find.
My freshman in high school Latin teacher's name was Father Mario Percelli. So
Yes.
here's another. Speaking of great Italian names,
I
right?
know a lot of Marios.
Well, awesome. Well, again, Carmine, it was great for you to take the time to catch up with us, and hopefully we can run into you again one of these days right out there on the road.
Yeah, thank you. Great opportunity. I love your podcast. I love the platform and your listeners who I
Well,
feel connected to. So thank you, John.
thank you, sir.